Okay, the time is 5:30. I'll call this meeting of the North City Council Finance Committee to order. Members present are Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath in place of Mr. Marmey, Mr. Bub, Mr. Cost, and myself. We do have a full agenda this evening, and just remind our audience that we'll have the administration speak to the piece of legislation, and then we'll have answers or questions from the committee, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Our first piece of legislation is to consider resolution number 1488, appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation. And several of these are dealing with the probation department. Mr. Savior? Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. Oh, it sits right there. Okay. Section 1 is dealing with appropriation for $365 for screen units.
Yes, these were units that were damaged by defendants, and defendants were required to pay back the amounts. So that's the amounts that are broken down in the financial committee request for, which total $15,175 versus $365.
Motion, Mr. Bug. Second, Mrs. Floyd. Any questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? It's a motion to move Section 1 on to full council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Section 2 is dealing with the jail diversion grant fund, returning money to the state, sir.
Yes, this is a jail diversion grant we received from the Department of Corrections. At the end of every year, we need to finalize money that they give us. If we don't spend it, we need to return it. So the $2,599.11, that's their money. We didn't spend it, so we need to return it. Motion.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Bug. Second, Mrs. Floyd. Any questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Section 3, sir.
These are service contracts. This is also part of our grant system, but this is under the probation improvement grant. We pay for treatment.
I'm sorry, we're on number, the third one, the counseling services?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought you were on 4.
We pay for treatment through behavioral healthcare partners and stairs at lab. The funding that they give us was $54,300. This is half of that, so we can start paying those bills as they come in. They come in every month, so we're willing to move the $27,150 into the appropriate account, so when those bills come in, we can pay them. And it's money we already have from the state of Ohio Department of Corrections. It's just a matter of moving it over so we can pay for that. These counseling items were written into the original grant. It's nothing new. It's just stuff that we have to pay. Bills that come in every month.
Make a motion.
Second. Motion, Mrs. Floyd. Second, Mr. Bug. So this isn't for an employee. This is for contracts that you have with other agencies?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like behavioral health partners?
Behavioral health care partners and lab.
And this will get you through the rest of this calendar year then?
Yes, it should.
Any further questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Section 4.
This also comes out of the 231.232, which is the probation improvement grant. Written into that original grant, which Scott Fulton had made application for, he wrote in money from Senate cars. These are cars that are given to defendants in our Live Court program, which is the drug court program. They're for things that they've
Can you give an example of an incentive that you would use?
Yeah, for instance, we've purchased gas cards before, $25 gas cards, where if the defendant completes a certain requirement during that particular month or week. They also get star cards. They have to get so many star cards in order to cash the cards in for an actual incentive card. So let's say they get 10 star cards, they want to redeem them for an incentive card, then they turn them in, and in turn they get an incentive.
Thank you. I'll make a motion.
Motion, Mr. Floyd. Second, Mr. Cost. Mr. Rapp.
Yeah, I'm just noticing in all these, you're asking us to waive the 2-day reading rule. I'm wondering why the sense of urgency and time.
Well, the incentive cards is urgent just for the simple fact we don't know when the defendant is going to have the star cards to cash in. So let's say they have court every week. So let's say they go to court, they have cards, they want to redeem them. Then if we don't have the cards in place, then we can't give them the incentive card. So that would be the urgency for that. The urgency for, are you just asking about item 4? Are you asking about the
Well, it's too late to ask for item 1, 2, and 3 because we've already voted on half it.
Okay.
I won't make you go back over those.
Well, the biggest urgency would be the contractual services and the incentive cards. Because the contractual services bills come in every month. When we have the money to pay those, and then the incentive cards, like I said, defendants can turn those star cards in at any time, so we need to have a surplus of incentive cards to get back to them. Right now, we have incentive cards for our ISP diversion grant, but the state of Ohio doesn't allow us to give those cards to anyone else other than the ISP program.
Any further questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? I have a motion from Mrs. Floyd, second by Mr. Cost. All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And our final section, section 5.
This was, well, at the beginning of someone's employment with us, we give them a uniform allowance of $200 to purchase things like what I'm wearing. This particular employee, Carrie Rice, was given the $200 allowance, but she went over, so we required her to pay us back $55, so we're owing that money to 116 account.
I'll make a motion. Motion, Mr. Bowe. Mrs. Floyd. All those in favor, or I'm sorry, any further questions from the committee? Mr. Johnson.
I just want to say that on this one, in section 5, it says that it's coming from the unappropriated balance of 116 adult probation fund. That's not a fund. It should be general fund 100. Just a point of clarification. I think that the clerk already knows that, and I just want to make sure you're aware.
I think that member should have the corrected version of your packets, so because there was an earlier one that was sent out.
Yeah, I had the incorrect.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, sir. Yes. You're welcome to stay. Okay, item number 2 is to consider resolution number 1489, authorizing and directing the mayor and service director of the city of Newark to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Franklin County Board of Commissioners for the fiscal year 2014 Urban Area Security Initiative award from the Columbus Urban Area Homeland Security Advisory Committee. Thank you, Ms. Gibbs.
It's a mouthful. We need to have this intergovernmental agreement so that the police department can spend their $15,790 that they will be receiving from Franklin County. They're going to be purchasing 22 radios and various accessories that go with the radios. I do need to ask you to waive the second reading because we have to have this agreement signed by the mayor and David Rhodes. So it goes back to Franklin County Commissioners, and they do their second part of the process so that we don't have any delay with the purchase of the equipment from the vendor.
Make a motion.
Motion, Mr. Bug. Second, Mrs. Floyd. My question is what, because this is an agreement with Franklin County,
Right.
and so what obligation will we have to this? I mean, this is money, we're getting $20,911, is that correct?
Well, $15,790. If you look at the attachment, there's a letter from Chief Sarver, and he lists the types of equipment that he wants. Franklin County is the grant recipient. We are sort of the sub-recipient of Franklin County. And basically, we just say we are going to comply with the rules of the grant. It's really no different than any of the Homeland Security grants the city of Newark has secured.
Okay, so it's just coming through the Franklin County Commission?
Yes, it's a regional grant, and this is our portion of it. But in order to access that funding, we have to have an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Franklin County Commissioners.
Okay. So we'll receive the funds, but there's no, matching dollars that comes out of our treasury?
No.
Okay, just want to make that clear.
Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Floyd?
I assume this is sort of like with the AG's demo grant that we, as a city, took care of the other communities around us.
Yeah, you can use that comparison.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Costa?
Mr. Olson, you gave the number 15,790 on the sheet from the police department, the chief server. The total is 20,911.
I thought it was 15.
In the letter, it is 15.
That's the discrepancy I'm asking about.
Oh, it's less. It's the 15. That was his request. It is the 15,790.
So is there some of this that we're just not getting, or?
There was some type of error. I wasn't involved in the front end of this.
Okay.
They came to me when it stalled with the agreement. And so I can't address why it's less. But, I mean, the police department will spend all the money that they can get because they need these radios.
But the amount that we would receive is 15,790.
Yeah.
That takes care of everything then?
Well, it takes care of all that we're going to get. I mean, it doesn't take care of everything, but it'll help us.
All right.
Any further questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? We do have a motion by Mr. Bell and a second by Mr. Floyd. Seeing no further questions, all those in favor of moving this on to full council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those same sign. Motion carries 5-0.
Will it be all right to waive this second reading?
Yeah, I'll recommend the petition then. Okay, so our next piece of legislation is to consider resolution number 1490, appropriating monies from the current expenses of the municipal corporation. And I see that you're still at the podium, and section 1 and 2 is dealing with the summer youth program.
Yes, the amount should be $1,180.10. And this is the reimbursement that is due to go to the Department of Development. Originally, we had put it in that computer hardware software. I would like to change that to the contingency fund. We had to change the very next day, so that's why I'm requesting that.
And just so that the members know, the account for the contingency account is the 100.601.5299.
Correct.
Where will be, I made a notation for that change.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Bug. Second, Mrs. Floyd. This is for the appropriation of the $1,180.10. Any further questions about this section? Questions from the audience? All those in favor of moving this section on to full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And section 2, the disappropriation for the summer youth program. I'll entertain a motion. Motion, Mr. Bub. Second, Mrs. Floyd. Any questions from the committee regarding the disappropriation for the summer youth program? Questions from the audience? Did you feel it was successful this year?
Oh, yeah.
So you thought it was good? Good.
Good program.
Great.
You know, all the mowing and the service department employees do the mowing, they were assisted by the summer youth. I think the venues coming into Newark looked a lot better because of it.
I agree with Barbara on that. Without that help, there's a lot of things we wouldn't have been able to accomplish.
Do you know how many youth we employed over the summer?
Well, Parks had 6 assigned. We never had 6 at one time. But Jeff Hotchkiss was very pleased with the group. You know, they learned a lot of, this is our second year, and we had a more responsive group this year, and they did a good job. So we're looking forward to participating again next year if we're invited to do so by Lincoln County.
Great. Seeing no further questions from the committee, from the audience, all those in favor of moving this on to full council signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And let's see, we are on to section 3, dealing with the AG demo grant.
Yes. This request is to disappropriate $21,347.39 because we did not get the final number until, after council passed
Just last
higher
year.
amount. Yes. So that's why we had to disappropriate. But I am pleased to say that Newark is working right along with our demos. We've got surveys out. So is Johnstown and so is Buckeye Lake. So we're very pleased with the progress.
Motion, Mrs. Floyd. Second. Second, Mr. Bub. Any further questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, section 4. We have the transit fund disappropriation.
That's not mine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair. As you're going to see, we have about half a dozen of these coming up right in a row. Basically, it's housekeeping items from the Department of Development to kind of clean things up for the auditor's office as we approach the end of the year. So if you want to take them one at a time, we'll go through. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you.
Yeah, Director Moore, as I mentioned to you earlier, it might be good, since there are new members of council here, this is our first year doing this type of disappropriations at the end of the year and stuff. If you could, when we go through these, just give sort of an explanation what we plan to do with appropriation and why we didn't, just sort of a summary for each of these, I'd appreciate it. And then, do you want to start with the transit?
Right, as you know, we really ceased operations for transit back December 31, 2012. Been working very closely with the Federal Transit Administration to complete all the paperwork and so forth, the closing grants that were involved. There were primarily grants involved to maintain operations for the transit system, and then there's another grant that was used to purchase the property on Wilson Street, which we recently transferred through the federal registry to Lincoln County. And was not quite sure how long this process was going to take to wind down things for transit. So when we were doing our budget last fall, we just sort of threw a wide net out there to try to encompass anything we thought we may have expenses on. And these numbers you see here before you now for the disappropriation are just numbers that we really didn't use. So hopefully we'll get this process completed. We're in conversation with the FTA just within the past couple of weeks, and they're hoping to write a final report on the closing of the transit system here really, I'm supposed to have had it by Friday, November the 7th, so hopefully it'll be very soon. But that's kind of a brief history of where we are and how we did the budget for last year for this year in 2014.
Thank you very much. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for this appropriation.
Motion by Mr. Bug. Second, Mr. Floyd. Any questions or comments from the committee? Questions, comments from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And section 5 is dealing with the police grant.
This particular grant fell under the account number of 296, which is a police grant fund, and it was entitled Safe Routes to School. And Safe Routes to School did involve a lot of reimbursing the police department to help on the days that we had what we call Safe Walk to School and Bicycle Days to several schools that were participants in this grant program. We had anticipated a big part of this project is to build a new pedestrian bridge over the creek that is running parallel with Legend and Liberty Elementary Middle Schools. Okay, and we thought there might have been some consultant fees, design fees that were going to be due this year. However, those were deferred until next year. So the dollars you see here were appropriated for those purposes at that time. But because they were going to be deferred until next year, we're going to disappropriate those.
So there's possibility that it's still not happening in 2015?
Well, it's a definite reality it's going to happen. We have about $500,000 what we call infrastructure grant on this particular Safe Routes to School portion. And a big chunk of that's going to be used to create that pedestrian bridge. There will also be some work done on Church Street from 21st Street up to Greenway Drive. So Wilson Middle School falls in that block, so we're going to be doing new sidewalks on both sides of Church Street with those funds as well. And that'll take place next year.
Second. Motion, Mr. Floyd. Second, Mr. Bug. Any further questions or comments from the committee? Questions, comments from the audience? All those in favor, move this on to full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And our section 6 is the revolving loan fund.
This particular fund is tied to the Community Development Block Grant funds. The CDBG funds really provides the most flexibility with what we can do in the department up there, a few less strings attached. And in this particular case, since we had that flexibility, we really just had an over-appropriation and we want to make sure we get back to the auditor's office and get those off the books.
Motion. Motion, Mr. Bug. Second, Ms. Floyd. Questions or comments from the committee? Questions, comments from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And the Brownfield Cleanup Fund.
This was it's entitled a Jobs Ready Site grant through the state of Ohio. It could be used to clean up brownfield sites. We've got a project targeted at 209 South 21st Street. There's a property there that's going to prove to have some contaminants on it. And we were very hopeful that we would be able to move that project along a little further into implementation and help clean up that brownfield site. It's a very complicated piece, to be quite honest with you. There's a lot of parts involved with property owners, banks, developers that will be involved in the cleanup process in the city. All that being said, there is good activity taking place right now in the project, but unfortunately we didn't use any of these dollars this year as we had anticipated. So we'll be full tilt into the next year though. We've got a number of things that are in place, just a few last details hopefully get ironed out. And ultimately this grant is actually a $500,000 grant in total. And that is to be used 100% for the cleanup for those sites.
Motion. Mr. Bug. Second. Mr. Cost. And you did get a 1-year extension for this grant, correct?
It's actually a 3-year grant. It has to be used by 2015, so we're still on track.
Okay.
We may have to ask for a bit of an extension, but if we got a good solid plan in place, we feel very, very confident that that's going to be ready to us, that extension will be granted.
Any further questions from the committee? Mr. Rapp?
Yeah, if this is a $500,000 grant, where's the other 200?
We didn't anticipate using all of it. Jeff, we figured we'd have some consultant fees. We had probably some analysis fees to do lab reports. For example, we did some additional drilling just this past month on the site to try to get a better example of how widespread the contamination was, what the quantity of it was, and just got a report about this thick about a week ago on that. And so those ultimate fees for the implementation of getting that rapid cleaned up is what these funds are for. Those fees will be paid for the analysis and the testing out of what we have the U.S. EPA assessment grant right now, and that's what we're using to pay for those costs.
Any further questions or comments from the committee? Questions from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Section 8 is a Housing Development Action Grant.
This grant actually came to the city, I believe, back in the late 1980s, and was put to good use for some projects, a couple projects throughout the city. What we are dealing with right now is some of these funds were used to purchase the house located at 191 Hudson Avenue. And it's been an item that Mayor Hall has been very concerned about from day one. The house is very blighted. It's a problem. It has a number of problems with people squatting in it, people getting in and out of the house, breaking into it, and so forth. And we anticipated dedicating a lot of time and effort from staff to going through a state-mandated process that will allow us to demolish this property. Because it is historic property on Hudson Avenue, there's a lot of strings that got attached to that. During the course of 2014, we were approached by several investors. One was a local investor here, and another was a person who used to live here, born and raised here, now lives out in California, and approached us about possibly taking this property on. By that I mean the grant funds, these HODAG funds as they're listed here on your paperwork, are federal funds, and because they are invested in the city's ownership, we'd have to pay any funds that we got in that project back in full. And both of these investors had approached us about doing just that. They would help us pay the loan, the grant back, and then possibly we have the property. Unfortunately, neither came to fruition, and now the city is in the process of putting a plan together that we think is going to bring everything to fruition in 2015. But these dollars, as you see here, were anticipated being used, going through that state-mandated process, but did not come to fruition, so we're going to disappropriate it.
Motion, Mrs. Floyd. Second. Second, Mr. Floyd. Now, are these going to be available next year or not?
These funds are not going to go away. The grant that funded several development projects here in town, they are required to make payments back, so we were accumulating a fund. It's an RLF fund, and we'll have to come up with some ways of putting that money to good use, but it's got to be specific to the grant, which says it had to be used for multi-family residential housing units.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions, comments from the committee? Comments, questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Section 9, the Home Revolving Fund.
This is another grant that, as money was being used from the grant and put in projects throughout the community, they did have a payback component associated with them, and that's where the RLF, the Revolving Loan Fund portion of this comes into play. Last fall, we were approached by Licking County Coalition for Housing to possibly take on a couple projects to provide affordable housing for low-income families. And so we dedicated some funds to those projects. Unfortunately, there was a lot of components to that deal, if you will. Licking County Coalition for Housing was dealing with their board and several different sources of funding to bring to the table to make this project possible. and things did not develop. So we want to disappropriate this fund. We're not able to use it, unfortunately. But in the future, we certainly could, and we will.
Motion, Mr. Floyd.
Second.
Second, Mr. Buck. Questions from the committee? Questions, comments from the audience? Question, Director Rose? Just yawning. Keep you awake. Keep you awake. All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Okay. Looks like our final section is disappropriation of funds from the LPA fund. It's the maintenance of streets, 205th. There he is. Mr. Moore.
Sir, I was before you earlier this year to ask for this appropriation, and the reason for this appropriation was to pay for the engineering consultant study for Cherry Valley Road Bridge. And the original plan was that the city would front the money for the study, and then we would be reimbursed back by ODOT as the study went on and as we submitted invoices to ODOT. As we got started with the process, ODOT changed their mind and said, look, we can pay for this all up front, so the city doesn't have to expend any money. So basically, the invoices come into me, I review them, send them to ODOT, and ODOT directly pays the consultant. So we have no money in it at this point. So the purchase order that I had originally written will be canceled, and would like to disappropriate these funds.
Motion. Motion, Mrs. Floyd. Second, Mr. Bug. Any questions from the committee?
I just have a comment. Could we get that done with a lot of other projects? That would be really nice.
Any further questions from the committee?
Can you use that money for a bribe to get closer to motivate them to pay Cherry Valley Road? River Road?
No, I don't.
This steps on the list.
Okay. Let's, any questions from the audience? All those in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Moorhead. And that concludes our legislation for Finance Committee. Next is Service.
I bring the Service Committee meeting to order. We have President Mr. Blake, Mr. Rath, Mr. Loretta, Mr. Bubb, and myself. We have one item. Consider Resolution 14-91 approving and ratifying an updated solid waste management plan.
This is just, as you may or may not know, we're part of the Coshocton Fairfield Licking Area Solid Waste District. They assess fees on solid waste that is discharged to the landfills in our 4-county area. And this is their, by Ohio law, they're required to have a management plan every 5 years. And this is their update to that plan that has to be ratified by 3 of the 4 largest cities in each county that they work out of, and 3 of the 4 county commissioners, and 60% of it represents 60% of the population. Something along that line. So that's to be ratified by the city approve the plan. The goal of the district is to reduce the amount of waste that goes to the landfill, solid waste that goes to the landfill. It used to be a little bit bigger deal for us because we used to haul all of our biosolids to the landfill. It was extremely costly for us to pay these fees. We do not do that anymore, so it's not as big as impact on the city as obviously everybody here pays this as part of their trash collection. So that's what these fees are for. So it appears there's no increase in these fees in this plan. So they're the same as they were in the last 5-year plan. Even though they're going to switch how they kind of reduce one and raise the other, so that the total fee ends up being the same.
Do we have any sort of copy of this plan?
A copy is available. I can get that to you if you'd like it.
I should know if we have plans.
Certainly we can do that. There's an electronic copy available on the website.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's about 270 pages long, so want some good bedtime reading. 10 chapters, and it's been in process for about 12 months now, so it's
very subtle, so thank you.
I've had Roger look at it and pull apart the numbers and look at it.
I see.
Which takes a while for us, so.
So I guess we'll just go for a motion.
Which is what, excuse me, why we didn't attach it to it.
Mr. Chairman, well, could you email the link to us at least?
I can email you a link, and I'll email there is a summary.
That'd be great.
I'll do that. Basically, what they're, no change of fees, and their goal is to reduce waste. And so they'll do things like they supply some money to the health department for enforcement of litter control, and the sheriff's department for litter control as well, and also to some of the townships for repair of roads near the landfills, that kind of thing. But their biggest chunk of their money goes to these recycling bins that you see around the county and the districts of, and then also for educational purposes. They put money into the Household Hazardous Waste Day. They put money into just another educational program, is one I can think of off the top of my head. So part of the fee that they charge is a requirement from Ohio EPA, which funds Ohio EPA for certain solid waste programs that EPA has. The solid waste section of Ohio EPA is funding mostly by these fees, discharge fees to the, so that's kind of in general what it's about. I mean, I'll send you this summary, and I'll send you a link to the entire
70 pages, but the summary I like.
Oh, you are now.
Any questions from the any questions from the audience? All in favor of moving this on to full council? Aye. All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have for service committee.
Sorry, I'm not going to do that. Okay, I'm going to call the Personnel Committee meeting to order. Present are Mr. Guthrie, Mr. Roletta, Mr. Love, Mr. Rath, substitute for Mr. Marmee, and myself. The item we're discussing tonight is ordinance 14-38, amending the position, classification, pay range, and position authorization tables of the Department of Public Service, Division of Street Maintenance and Traffic Control, by combining the two departments and creating one additional crew leader, senior, and one sign fabricator, impound clerk, one assistant street traffic superintendent, and abolish one clerk typist sign fabricator, one traffic control operations manager, and one street maintenance operations manager. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sometime last year, we received news from Dave Reed that he was going to retire. And that's kind of what started this process. After Mr. Reed retired, I came in and put forward to this council legislation to abolish Dave's job. And Dave was the street supervisor out in the street department. And I wanted to abolish his job and create a street and traffic supervisor. Council was gracious enough to give me the authority to do that. We followed that plan. We put that position out for bid. We had 3 internal applicants. And at the end of the interview process, we decided to promote Mr. Ralph Prince to the street and traffic supervisor position, thus creating a vacancy of his job. Once that vacancy was created, Carol, I believe you and I spoke, and you asked me not to fill that. Mark, you and I spoke, and you said, David, I prefer that you don't fill it. You even mentioned that you felt that a possible combination of the street and traffic department would be good. And I agreed with you, and I said I would work on it. And you asked me to communicate with the unions. You asked me to communicate with council, which I think I've been very open and communicated with everybody. And so tonight, I stand before you to ask you to take the second step with me, the step that was asked of you. And Yes, we're abolishing a few positions. Yes, we're creating a few positions. Nobody's going to be displaced. We do not look for anybody to be unemployed. Now, one of the positions that are abolished, if somebody retires, I can't say that they won't retire or not, but if they do, then we'd have to go out for bid a little bit further. But what we're looking at is a combination of these departments to streamline them to pick up a little additional work for the citizens.
Anybody up here have any questions? Mr. Rhodes while he's here? I know there's some other people to speak, but... Okay.
Carol, I've got a few questions.
Okay.
And David, you did a good job there explaining some of our discussions on this. I've been a long time advocate for merging streets and traffic because of efficiency issues, and my hope was that we could eliminate a supervisor and actually add an additional worker, and you indicated that your hope is in 2015 to see an additional worker added, correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Mark. What we're doing is we're going to be promoting from within to the senior crew leader position and another crew leader position, which will vacate 2 positions. Now, in the 14 budget, those positions certainly aren't funded to be filled. As we approach the 15 budget, which we're not ready to present tonight, I will be lobbying and talking with the mayor to see if it makes any sense to fill one of those vacant positions. There is roughly a $63,000 a year savings to these moves tonight. That savings comes out of the fact that we're going to be promoting a couple of people that are currently employed by the city and to some supervisory positions or crew leader positions.
David, one of the things, and I think that you folks have heard this from the union, there appears to be some vagueness regarding job description. And I know that they have expressed some concern regarding the traffic tech, street equipment operators job description. To my knowledge, those have not been provided to the union based on the changes. Is that something that both the union and council could see before final 3 weeks on this?
You have the job descriptions attached.
Okay, the job descriptions we have attached are not for the tech street equipment operator.
There are no changes to those job descriptions.
So even though the title changes...
The title's going to change.
Okay, wait a minute here. Because I thought that the previous title, you had equipment operator title, and then you had the traffic tech title. Aren't those 2 separate titles?
Those are still separate titles.
That's how we are.
Okay, but aren't you bringing those under the same job description?
We're bringing them under the same umbrella. There's still going to be traffic department duties to be done. And at the bottom of their job description, it says, and other duties as required. So each evening when Mr. Prince and Mr. Varner meet and decide job duties and what's going to be done the next day, and who's here and who's on vacation, things of that nature, they'll determine whether they need 4 people working in the traffic department at that night. So it'll be a day-by-day decision. The intent is to still have 4 traffic techs, and the intent is to still have your street department people. The intent's there. So there's no changes to the job changes.
So basically, if I understand correctly, the additional duties that the traffic techs would take or would have would fall under the category of other duties as assigned.
Yes.
Okay. It seems pretty vague to me as a former HR guy, but
I get you.
all right. Well, let me ask.
Mark, and there's plenty of work out there for this Vortex to do sign work, then that's what they're gonna do.
One of my other, and this is a big issue, and I don't think the union would agree with me at all on this, but I'm concerned about the logic behind, we've got the what's it called? What's the position's called? The crew leaders at 38s, and you're proposing the senior crew leader at a 45. That's a 7-step jump. Can you? Because I've looked at the job descriptions, and I'm just, especially during the current fiscal situation we're dealing with the city, I'm trying to justify in my mind how we can justify raising that position 7 pay ranges.
That position will be very, very integral with the Assistant Street Traffic Superintendent. It will be very integral with the Superintendent of Traffic and Streets. And that individual will be working with the crew leaders, both for streets and traffic crew leaders, as well as that person will be actually working, a hands-on working person. That's why we're abolishing the one position that was the Assistant Superintendent for street. And actually, yes, jumps up, but if you look at the salary, what we were paying somebody to the position, it's several jumps down, because we all agreed we felt we were management heavy. So we lowered that salary by some, I think, like $14,000 down. So you could look at it that it is up from the regular crew leaders, but you could also look at it that it's down from where it was in the position Mr. Prince used to hold. But also that person will be working nights when the snow's falling too.
When you make a decision to, for instance, bump this 7 ranges, or 7 pay grades, or whatever you want to call them, did you look at the duties of other 38s, other 40s, and other 45s in city government when making that decision?
Well, you can make an argument that in some cases that this position might be overpaid, or some cases in this position it might be underpaid, but it's a unique position. It's a position like no other within the city at this point. And Martin, I've talked to you about creating another senior crew leader position, but we held back from doing that at this time because of budgetary constraints. That one's a unique position too. This position will oversee an awful lot of work that goes in the city, and they will have a fair amount of responsibilities. This position will be away from home at nights, plowing snow. And the uniqueness of this position is he's allowed to work, or she's allowed to work.
And when they are working nights, they will receive the differential of 60 or 70 cents an hour, which is in the contract.
We'll follow what's over in the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay. I don't have any more questions at this point.
Anybody else have questions of Mr. Rose up here? Anybody in the audience have questions of Mr. Rose?
Make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this issue? Mrs. Shoemaker? Okay.
Good evening, I'm Lynn Shoemaker, President of AFSCME.
John Moulton, Vice President of AFSCME.
And I believe everybody got a letter that we had sent Human Resources Director and forwarded to all of you, outlining some concerns we had. I'd like to say Director Rhodes, I'm not choosing my words carefully, I don't want to offend anybody, but I don't believe we've been given sufficient consideration for us to be able to view these, to talk about them with the city. Most of the conversations we have had were one-on-ones with David. I had one-on-one with him. Buster was called one-on-ones. BJ was called one-on-ones. And then on each occasion I asked for job descriptions, which they did not have. Mr. Rhodes indicated in September that he was going on vacation, and when he got back, that they would have the job descriptions ready, and asked me to schedule a meeting with our council aide representative, because at the time I did not feel that I should be in there bargaining for my own position. They were to talk to John and to Bill DeVore, who's our staff rep from Council 8, which they did somewhere around the 23rd of September. I was in that meeting, but John can explain to you what happened in that meeting, and to be honest with you, the meeting lasted approximately 5 to 7 minutes. That is not enough time for us to go through these things. I have given emails to Director Buskirk, even as early as 7 o'clock this morning. They received emails from me asking, please explain these duties. I got another response about vague answers. They can't seem to explain the duties to me. Asked me as the exclusive bargaining agent for these positions, so we have to have some kind of information to be able to determine whether they're in the right classification and the right range to pay for that classification. So I've asked for and not received all of the job duties for any of the positions that are going to be in this newly blended department. We're not opposed to blending the departments. We would like to be given the chance to review these, to explain to the city without having to do it on one-on-one meetings, or in very limited meetings, or a phone conference that we had, because Mr. Busker apparently could not understand them either. And so we're going to ask that happen before any action is taken before this council. I do want you to understand we're not opposed to any kind of blending of the departments. Okay, our opposition is we have not been given the chance to sit down with these people and really make sense of what these things are. And David Rhodes explained to you when he asked about the traffic technicians, which I've been trying to get that information for several weeks now out of them. They said they're not going to change. Well, let me explain to you, when you take a classification that's traffic technician and you divide it off into another classification now that says traffic technician / street maintenance operator, you've got an issue there because now you're blending two positions. These are the kind of things that we would like to work on with the city to avoid arbitration hearings, because that, to be honest with you, that's what's going to happen in this case. There are going to be multiple arbitration cases out of this, which is going to be an unnecessary expenditure to anybody who lives in the city of Newark's dollars. So we would like the opportunity for them to sit down seriously with us and go over all of these things, where we can all come here together and say, we have a united front for this department. So I'm going to ask you, if you go ahead, you can ask us any questions you like. I mean, I'm pretty blunt about stuff, so don't be offended if I say anything, but ask away anything you'd like to hear out of us.
Okay, are there any members of the committee who have any questions?
Yeah, let me ask Lou, do you have any comments regarding the issue of the job, the specific traffic cap street equipment operator combination? Are you concerned about that particular job description?
I am, because as I indicated to Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Busker and Mr. Prince in a telephone conference, that those people are not equipment operators. They do not have experience operating heavy equipment. The only thing, they operate the bucket trucks, but the only reason they do that is because of the weight limit on them. If it's over 26,000 pounds, you have to have a CDL, which they do have, but they are not heavy equipment operators. They don't know about any of this type of stuff. And when I expressed that concern to Director Rhodes, he said, well, they would just get them whatever training they want. The problem is they're saying that they're just switching over these job titles, okay? And what they said with the job titles is that came from the advice of the law director, who told them that if they just changed the job titles, then they didn't have to put them out there in any of this legislation. So this really, to me, is not a complete legislation of what is going to occur in that department. In the blended department is what I'm talking about. There are other concerns about the senior traffic street crew leader position, that nobody qualified for that. When we originally had talked about it, nobody qualified for that. I think Director Rhodes got kind of agitated with me about it when I was trying to explain to him that if they want to go that route, that's fine. There's other things we have to do in the contract to explain, because that position was originally floated to the union as a 38/45 when you questioned about that, okay? I asked them to explain that to me. What does that mean, 38/45? Director Buskirk said on this telephone conference, he would like the same opportunity that they have with other classifications that are in here. Street equipment operators start as a pay range 28. They're a 28 through a 36. Okay? They move up like every 2 years to the next step of the process. So they would be like a 28 for 2 years, they'd be a 32 for 2 years, until they get to the top. And that's what I explained to them. That's okay if that's how you want to look at that. But we need to do something in here, because there is a progression chart in the back that tells about different classifications and how they move up in the series, okay? And that's when all of a sudden it became a 45. So there's lots of things we need to talk about with the city, to be honest with you, on this. So that is why I'm asking to have this tabled. And you can put a limit to it. You can set the limit. I don't care. As long as the city would make a good effort to sit down and talk with us. You know, the minority leader could be invited. The majority leader could be invited to watch the process, whatever it takes. We're not against the blending of departments. We're against how this is being done. Okay, because we're going to have a lot of contract violations going on. Okay,
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question of the law director when we're done with the Shoemaker.
Anybody else have any questions for Mrs. Shoemaker? Any council?
I've got more
All right.
questions. Lou, would you be satisfied if this moved out of here tonight, if the administration would make a commitment during the next 3 weeks to sit down with you folks and discuss these job descriptions?
I'd say yes, but I'd also say no, and the reason being, because then we would have to argue our case in front of everybody. We'd be back up here arguing the same stuff again. This is, I mean, we would. That's exactly what would happen. I don't think it's unreasonable for legislators to listen to a union representative who's saying that these things did not occur, regardless of how many times you've been told they have. They did not occur in the way that I'm understanding from some of you that they occurred. We want the opportunity to sit down and look at these classifications that we represent. I haven't been given them all. I don't understand what the opposition is to giving me all of the classifications. If they haven't changed them, then give them to me. They had no problem putting a mechanic in here who's not being changed. Why won't they give me the traffic technicians? These are the questions I have. This is what we'd like to work out with them. I'd rather be on the same page than be at odds, and I expressed that in an email today to these gentlemen. That's what we're asking, and I don't think it's unreasonable.
Any other questions from up here? From council members in the audience? From any audience members?
Just quick.
Yes. Excuse me, what's your name?
Anna Real.
You need to go to the podium, so it's on the microphone. I'm sorry. And you have to give your name and address, please.
Emma.
Anna Reel, 1293 Granville Road.
Thank you.
My question just was, again, I didn't understand who you were representing.
I'm the president of ASME.
The union.
Okay,
The service workers union. I thought maybe that, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Bell?
Thank you. I had a question for Law Director Sassen. This reorganization that's in front of us tonight, is there any conflict with the current, does this present any conflict with the current collective bargaining agreement that just went into effect?
Not in my opinion. I don't know what it would be. I've heard Ms. Shoemaker's comments. I saw the letter that she copied all of you on. It didn't give any guidance as to what provision of the contract might be violated. I've reviewed the proposal. I've reviewed it in light of the collective bargaining agreement. Positions aren't being created outside of the bargaining unit. The rates of the job descriptions for the street traffic tech, the position that's been at issue here, and Mr. Guthrie, some of your questions were about the job description. It was my opinion that the title of that position may have been changing, but the job duties weren't. The job description wasn't being rewritten. That any additional work that was envisioned by the department for any employees would be fit in the existing job description that they have under other duties. So that really wasn't a new position being created. The additional positions are being created, with the additional positions being created, and it's a bargaining unit position, which is one of the only issues that the CBA addresses that's subject to arbitration, is whether the work should be in the bargaining unit or outside the bargaining unit. It's inside the bargaining unit. And also with regard to the rate of pay, as Mr. Guthrie indicated, that rate of pay is going up fairly significantly. I'm just kind of at a loss. I don't really understand. I can understand maybe why people aren't happy with it, but I don't understand how it could be viewed as a violation of the CBA.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Doug, can I ask you a question? It's a personnel-related question. The hire-rehire policy, is that something that council should approve, or is that just something that I think this was established back during the Debo administration? Is that something that council does not need to be involved in?
Yes and no. Council could, as part of a piece of legislation, council could draft and incorporate into our codified ordinances a retire-rehire policy. Council's never chosen to do that. The previous administration drafted, I suppose, a policy, but that they used in a particular situation. I'm not even sure it was a policy as much as it was an agreement in a particular situation that was applicable to a particular situation. That being the case, it certainly is not binding on the current administration or any future administration. The only way to really make it binding would be if you put it in one of the personnel policy statements into the CBA, or council were to pass its own piece of legislation. Otherwise, when what you're talking about with the previous administration, again, I think it was relating only to one particular situation. I'm not sure how broad the application was, but that was really just the previous administration binding itself to a policy, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
I looked at it.
Can you come up to the microphone? Sorry. Yeah, I know.
And I was not Law Director Sassen talked about he didn't think, from looking at the legislation, that there was any violations. If you look at the I'm going to specifically just address what he talked about. I'm sorry, mine's back. If you look at the body of the ordinance, and you see there is section 1, section 2, section 3. You will see the language says the compensation for the position of streets traffic crew leader senior shall be up to $22.87 an hour. And the sign fabricator / impound clerk shall be up to $18.95 an hour. There is no one else in the city that has a sliding scale like that. What does that mean? Nobody else has a sliding scale. In other words, the job pays $18.95 an hour, you're in pay range 32. They're usually the beginning rate. There's none of this up to. In my opinion, when I read legislation like that, that means it's discretionary. So that's a concern of ours. And that is addressing what he said, what Director Sassen talked about.
Lou, in this case, are both of these salaries at the top of the stated ranges? So 2287.
I'm assuming this would be in 2015. Since we're at the end of 2014. So, a pay range 45 in 2015 would begin at 2145, and that person would move up in incremental steps depending on their longevity to 2287. So 2287 would be the high pay rate, the highest rate of that.
So it'd be the highest rate of pay range 45.
Right. And then the sign clerk or sign fabricator, impound clerk begins at $17.52 and goes to $18.95. So $18.95, to answer your question, is the highest range of that.
And your concern then is the discretion that's in there, correct? That in some way conflicts with the collective bargaining agreement?
Right, with what's in here. Because this is discretionary language, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not a law director, but I've read plenty of contracts. I've never seen anything like this in any jobs that have been created here.
Mr. Sassen, did you want to comment on that?
Well, just briefly on that issue, the way I read the ordinance and where it indicates up to was exactly based on similar analysis that your questions pointed to and what Lou was talking about, that there's a beginning wage and there's a top wage. And the top wage for these two positions is the amount that's stated in the ordinance. So if a person were to be hired off the street for one of these positions who had no prior seniority or no prior involvement with the city, they'd be paid at the lower end of that range, and they'd be paid up to, in the one case, $18.95, and in the other case, $22.87. But that's what the up to means. It doesn't mean, and clearly nobody's going to say, well, that means, they can be paid $7.50 an hour when you just look at the CBA, and the CBA says, here's what the beginning wage is, and here's what the top wage is. That's what the guiding factor is in these pay ranges, is the CBA. And this just simply, this up to references the fact that each of these positions, based on the amount of time you have with the city, is how much you're paid from an entry level up to this maximum amount. So that's how I read it. I don't think it should be inferred to read that it's going to pay something less than the CBA. And frankly, if the city were to hire somebody at less than the entry level for the CBA, I'd probably represent Lou on that.
Well, in my opinion, it's misleading the way it's read, the way it's written.
Right. Good question.
So, I guess I'm a little confused as to your opposition. If I were to hire a sign clerk who had decades of experience with the city, in another area or had decades of experience as a sign clerk in another city, you would be opposed to be rewarding that person for experience and hiring them in at $18.95 at the top of the range?
No, you don't, no, they would not start at $18.95. Everybody comes in at the lowest rate.
Regardless of experience, regardless of qualification.
That's correct. Everybody starts because it's based on your time.
Okay.
You have to be
So where's your opposition?
the way it's written. It says up to, and that is, in my opinion, discretionary. In my opinion, it's not written according to how anything's ever been done.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question of Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Please. Just, quick question. I get, the heart of the legislation. You run the department. Does this reorganization help you every day? Does it create more productivity for the people, the citizens of Newark?
Yes, and I will reflect briefly. Back last winter, all the snow we had, many times due to my guys' overtime in the street department and the hours we put in, that I went to wait. In fact, for the last 3 years, we went outside of the street department for sign-ups. Anybody with a CDL could offer to come in and help us snow emergencies. There were several times I pulled from the traffic department to assist us in that manner.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. I think, you have...
I guess, David, are you folks willing to, during the next 3 weeks, to at least meet with the union and talk about these job descriptions?
Mark, I'd be happy to sit down and talk with the union. I'd be happy to invite Carol to sit down and talk with the union as we have in the past. There's nothing hidden here. There's nothing secret. And the meeting lasted 7 minutes. Frankly, it lasted 7 minutes because it was all about what Ms. Shoemaker wanted to be paid. That's exactly what it was about. How much she was to be paid. Okay, so it was a short meeting. But yes, we are willing to sit down and continue to talk. Thank you.
I don't want to get in a squabble with Mr. Rhodes. But to be honest with you, when we had met a few times, he floated out anywhere from pay range 38, and when they finally met, apparently it was a 32, then it was back to a 34, and the minute we gave them a document saying we weren't going to support this, it became a 31. This doesn't affect me because I have bumping rights. I may use those. Okay? So, don't say it was all about what I wanted to be paid, because you know in that meeting, you and I were there, and you know in that meeting I said I was uncomfortable talking about my pay.
Lou, I'll tell you, that was not the meeting I was referring to. It was the meeting with John.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Don't cut me off, okay? I told him I was uncomfortable speaking to him anymore about any rate paid for me. I called Director Buzzkirk and I said, Mike, I'm uncomfortable speaking anymore with David about my rate of pay. And apparently Mr. Buzzkirk said to him that I was uncomfortable because the next time I met with him, he said, I understand you're uncomfortable. And I said, yes, I don't want to talk about my rate of pay. You will have to talk to our staff rep and to Mr. Moulton about my rate of pay. I don't want to be involved because this is my job. That is what this 7, yes it was, Dave.
You know, Lou.
That's what happened,
Lou,
okay?
I will be real clear and say one more thing on this. You're very creative in the way that you explain things. Very creative. You know, I think we've had the debate. I think it's on the floor. And I think it's time to council.
I'm not creative. I'm telling you exactly what happened. I can't be bought, and that's what happened, okay?
Madam Chair, I want to say that I feel bad this got personal, Dave. I think you crossed the line, David. I think you crossed the line.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just, the last comment I'll have is, I think this has been a work in progress. At the end of the day, we're saving over $60,000. We're getting more productivity. I think it's a no-brainer. With that, I'll call the question to send this on to the full council.
Madam Chair, I move to amend.
Okay. Two.
My amendment would be to reduce the senior crew leader from a 45 to a 40, which I think is consistent with other areas of city government. And let's see if we got a second, and then I'll...
Reduce senior crew leader to a 40?
Yes, on the 45.
I'll go ahead and make a second. Madam Chairman, can I interject just briefly on a matter of parliamentary procedure? We really need to have a motion on or a vote on your motion to call the question.
Yeah.
And then you need a motion and a second to adopt before we can entertain the amendment.
Okay. All right. So, a motion was made to call the question by Mr. Bub.
A motion to adopt.
So you got to vote on the motion.
Yeah, we got to vote on the question.
I'm
Do we
sorry.
need a second to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Or is there a second to call the question? Okay. Second to call the question by Mr. Raff. And that means we would vote on the main motion. All those in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
Now you need a motion and a
Now
second.
we need, okay, so we have a motion to amend by Mr. Marmee, or Mr. Guthrie, I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, you need a motion to adopt in the second first.
Well, we had a motion to adopt
That was
early
out of
on,
order.
I didn't hear
That
it.
was out of order, I'm sorry.
way back at the beginning.
There was already a motion on the floor by
Yeah, Mr. Rath made a motion and Mr. Bub seconded it a long time ago.
I'll
We've
support
just had a long discussion in the process.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, all right, so now we're back to the motion to amend, made by Mr. Guthrie, seconded by Mr. Roletta.
Madam Chair, the only other thing I would say is, we got a $63,000 cost savings here. There will be a little bit more cost savings if we reduce this position from a 7 pay range increase to a 2 pay range increase above the crew leader position.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the amendment? Anybody up here?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I ask the opinion of the service director, what his thoughts are? I know this got discussed and duties. Is there anything you have on this?
If that's council's will, we will support it.
Any other questions?
We want you to take it from Mr. Prince.
Okay, Mr. Prince?
I'm not sure whose title this is affecting his name. What's your opinion on bringing it from a 45 to a 40?
I suggested to Dave, as far as a 45, looking at the responsibilities of a current union employee in the engineer's office that is a 45 that is turned loose on a job. I can give him direction of what needs to be done and move on and do the other jobs and rely on that individual to be as a supervisor, but at a union job. That was my suggestion, and is what you make of it. I can't understand why the union, you're willing to promote their employees within or want to cut them back down when you're working with the union and trying to give them more feet on the ground versus management.
Can you say
The union does.
Well,
That's coming from me.
I understand that, Mark. I understand that. But, I'd like to see how many union members step forward, to look at promoting within, to assist in that manner. But
Can I ask you, it's running the department, do you feel this, taking this down, is this going to affect people wanting to apply? Is that a deterrent to get?
I believe to get the full effect. For instance, King Road, we paid this past summer if I were to take a crew up there, pay this, go to the job south into town, them, I don't know how they would personally feel, knowing they had the opportunity to move up to a 45 versus a 38, and they'll be assisting when I'm not present, or if BJ's not present, we have vacation, kids sick, whatever, they would fill our role as well. So, that's how I felt about it, and, I asked Mr. Riggs to give it that level.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Any other questions from the audience? So we're ready to vote on the amendment?
And that's the only amendment that's dropping at 45 to 40.
Yeah, the only amendment is to reduce the senior crew leader pay to a 40 from a 45. That's the amendment. Okay. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Those opposed? Okay. Motion passes 5-0. Okay. So we are now to the main motion with the amendment added. Is there any additional discussion to that?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to ask one question of Director, if that's okay.
Sure.
I know Mrs. Shoemaker expressed some concern about a sliding scale from, I can't remember what the starting pay was, up to a $22.87 for one, or $18.95 for another. Is there any specific criteria set for when they get bumped up, or is it just time, or could you talk about that process a little bit?
What we hope is that those positions will be filled with people that are familiar with those positions, and they will start at the top pay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? Are we ready to vote? Okay.
Madam Chair, I want to make a comment because David brought up this issue of the shoemaker's pay range, and I just want to say, I had a number of conversations with the shoemaker, and at no time did she make her conversation with me about her wages, and I just think that's important that people know that.
Okay. Anything else before we vote? Okay. All those in favor of voting for ordinance 14-38 as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We are done. Thank you.